This video is about something that is often conflated, two concepts, constructionism versus constructivism. So I thought it might be useful to do a separate video that discusses the differences between both, if there are any differences, of course, using Brown and Clark's, that is Virginia Brown and Victoria Clark's take on the differences between both, using their book Thematic Analysis, A Practical Guide 2021. The reason why I'm using this resource is because it's one of the best that I've seen in terms of defining the differences, or kind of having a take and explaining some of the differences between constructionism versus constructivism. So Brown and Clark acknowledge that this is a tricky question, or one of the trickiest questions out there. They use constructionism in their book, but they also acknowledged that constructivism is also used in the, for example, over here, qualitative methodological literature, and sometimes interchangeably with constructionism. Differences in terminology sometimes reflect disciplinary divergences. And in a way, when sociologists use constructivism and psychologists use constructionism to refer to broadly the same tradition. Some argue that constructionism and constructivism actually capture different theoretical traditions, not just disciplinary differences in terminology, but the meaning of both of these terms is often contested and confused. So Brown and Clark suggest that there is no universal agreement on what these different theoretical traditions are, and with each there is again a range of different perspectives. But they nonetheless tried to give some sort of an idea about the differences between both, which I found the best so far. So they mentioned that there have been numerous attempts to map the terrain of constructivist research by, for example, Chiari and Nuzzo in 1996. But within their book, they map out their understanding of the differences between the constructivist versus the constructionist theoretical traditions. In their mapping of the qualitative terrain, constructivism, like constructionism, is concerned with the production of meaning by people. However, often this constructivism often has a more individual and psychological orientation than constructionism. So that's an important thing to note. The latter, so constructionism, focuses more on social, for example, the collective, the relational, meaning-making, even if individually expressed or accessed. This focus has led to critiques of constructionism as being something that empties the person of psychological content, and associated critiques of an absence of personal agency within some constructionist analysis. In psychology, constructivism is particularly associated with the personal construct psychology of George Kelly from 1955, and the latter work of Maturana 1988 and others, often described as radical constructivists to distinguish their approach from the personal construct psychology. So that is psychology. Constructivism within the psychology field. What about sociology? In sociology, constructivism seems more associated with theoretical traditions, such as labeling theory, symbolic interactionism, and script theory, that they've identified as precursors to social constructionism, rather than as social constructionism fully realized. Some sociologists, no doubt, they argue that these traditions are constructionist. But they emphasize, as you could see, they also acknowledge that it is a mess, and the definition is perhaps, is a fool's errand, as they put it. So, but let's dig deeper about what they saw as useful in terms of how you distinguish between both with this mess that is there. So in So is constructivism just constructionism by another name? They asked in their book. Sometimes. That's their answer. When people use it that way. But really, no. What they argue is that they do not regard them as the same, although there are synergies between both. So, for example, when it comes to qualitative research, both constructivism and constructionism acknowledge the active role of the researcher in knowledge production. However, constructionism goes further than that. People use the term constructionism precisely to indicate their rejection of the individualistic accounts of constructivists. So this is they see a fundamental difference between both terms, which I also found to be very useful, in that constructionism goes further than the constructivists, in that they reject the individualist accounts of constructivists. We think constructivism is more aligned to critical realism than the relativist ontology associated with constructionism. So this is how they see the differences also between both. But given the different takes on constructionism as well as constructivism, it's important to try to demarcate the particular version of constructionism or constructivism that informs your work. So hopefully this gives you an idea about the differences between constructivism and constructionism, because these two terms are often conflated when it comes to epistemologies and qualitative methodologies as theories of how you conduct your research.